Hey everyone, Patrick Lloyd with WMBF News here. Thanks so much for joining us for this, I guess, I don't know what, web exclusive, YouTube exclusive, something like that. Just kind of experimenting around with something here. This is something I've wanted to do for a while where I've interviewed so many people who have been so fascinating to me, and I've had super lengthy interviews with them, sometimes upwards of 20, 30, 45 minutes. And with my job as a TV news reporter, I can only air maybe 2 or 3 minutes of that on any given day. And I just I mean, look, I love my job, of course, but sometimes I just want to tell the whole story from the actual person who I'm talking to. So that's what I'm doing today. And my guest today is Richard Sexton. He is about as incredible a human being as you can possibly
Yeah.
imagine. He's already denying it. He's too humble to admit that he's incredible, but he recently went on an incredible journey. He ran 750 miles from just about the westernmost point in North Carolina, all the way across North Carolina and then down south into South Carolina, finishing in Surfside Beach. And he did it all for a great cause too, for autism awareness. So we're going to talk to Richard Sexton now about this incredible journey. Richard, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I love talking about this and about the event itself.
Absolutely. I know last time we talked, it was one of those conversations I mentioned where I think we probably talked for around 45 minutes. And again, well, I guess no, the first time we talked, because obviously the last time we talked was at the finish line of your
Yeah.
journey. And then we talked before you even took one step on that journey. And during that interview, it was probably 45 minutes or something, and of which, again, I could only air like 2 minutes or something. So I'm glad to share a full recap, so to speak, of your incredible journey. So I want to just start, I guess, by asking, tell me your history, I guess, when it comes to ultra running. You've been doing this since the 90s, right?
Yeah. I don't really. I'm terrible at record keeping. I know that I've done over 100 marathons and ultra marathons and some Ironmen thrown in there. But have been a runner my entire adult life. I'm 57, and I started running actually when I was in middle school. So it's just been, it's part of who I am, right? I live, breathe, eat, run. And I've been very, very, very fortunate to not have any injuries, and careful to make sure you cross train and do all the stuff you're supposed to do to keep all your muscles, firing. But I consider myself very fortunate to be able to run at this age and do the ultra events that are out there, which are really, I encourage anyone. You have to take it one step at a time, but if you're interested in really finding out who you are, do an ultra, and you dig deep pretty quickly.
A lot of people out there aren't even aware of the world of ultra marathons. It's just, a lot of people think, oh, this 26.2 distance is it. That's the limit of the human body. And no, for any further than that, you explode or something like that. But obviously, there's this whole niche world that you and I are both kind of a part of, this ultra
Right.
marathoning world. So, what was it that drew you to run farther than 26.2 miles in the first place?
Um, because when you get into these distances, as you well know, a lot of it's very psychological, and it's about your willpower, not just your body, but your kind of your mental state and your ability to push yourself mentally. And it is kind of the ultimate individual sport. I'm very much of an individualist. I'm terrible at team sports, but this is something it's up to you how well you do or not. And so that just appeals to my personality. And you mentioned people's perception of the marathon being the ultimate distance, and as we know, like, the ultimate distance is really 10 times that, right? And that's what's and who knows, I mean, people run 300 miles at a stretch. Very, very few. We're talking, like, I can count them on both hands, but it is possible, just as it's possible for somebody to run a sub 2 hour marathon, which they thought was beyond the limits of human endurance. So that part of it is also neat, as well, as we test ourselves and we find there's always one step beyond what we can do where we thought we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And along with that, I think just as interesting as taking part in the ultramarathon world is just learning more about it as well. Because I know for me, I mean, my history of ultramarathoning, like before I got super into it, was just I knew that 100 milers existed because my dad has some friends who have done a few. And then it was totally kind of erased from my mind for several years until it kind of resurfaced a few years ago, where I was like, whoa, like I was doing more research about this. And like you find out people do longer and longer than what you think is possible. So you think, oh, 100-mile race, wow, that's crazy. And then you find out, whoa, there's actually 200-mile races out there and 240. And then, you know, before you know it, I'm watching this documentary called 3100 Run and Become. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
It's a great film, and it's about the longest foot race in the world, as far as anyone is aware, 3,100 miles around a half-mile block in Queens, New York. And there's a great scene where the main guy who they follow, who's won that race like 9 times or something, he's getting a haircut in the RV that's camped out there at the start-finish line for this race. And he looks at the camera and he says, any race where you have to get a haircut is what a real race is. Anything shorter than that is just a sprint. Where you have to get a haircut during the race. That's how long it is. But yeah, people are insane out there, and it's crazy because obviously what you did, 750 miles, is insane. But to think that people do way longer than that is just, it's mind-boggling. But when it comes to your journey, all the way from almost the westernmost point in North Carolina, all the way across North Carolina, and then down south into Surfside Beach. When did this first cross your mind as something that you might want to do? Because obviously it's not the normal person who says, oh, I just want to run 750 miles.
Yeah, well, it was born of the pandemic, really. Well, I should back up and say, so in 2016, I ran the Myrtle Beach Marathon for Champion Autism Network, carrying Slappy for the marathon, and did 10 slam balls every mile or so. And
explain Slappy for anyone who's not familiar.
Yeah, sorry. So Slappy, I don't have him with, he's downstairs, but it's a 25-pound slam ball. It's just a big black ball about the size of a basketball, and weighs 25 pounds. And it's, used a lot in CrossFit workouts and that type of thing. So I brought the slam ball with me and ran the whole marathon carrying him, and did these slam balls, and we raised a couple $1,000, and it was a lot of fun, and kind of put it aside. Fast forward a few years later, the pandemic is here, and my job kind of changed due to the pandemic. So I had some free time and thought, like, what can I do that's not just a little bit impactful, but that's like big, that's huge. I even wrote out a chart of, like, because I'm a little bit, OCD about that. I'm like, I wanted to see, okay, what are all my options here? I want to do something really, really big. And at first I thought I wanted to run from the southernmost tip of the US all the way up the coast, up through Canada, self-supported, doing this crazy run. And my wife looked at me, she's like, you're not doing that. That's just not going to happen. I'm really glad she said that, because it turned out even just doing North Carolina was a lot harder than I anticipated. But it was sort of born of the pandemic, and I really wanted to do a charity event, something that helped other people. That was the whole point, is something that made an impact on other people in a positive way. And I'm very attached to Champion Autism Network and Becky. The work she does is amazing. It's such a grassroots, fundamental organization in terms of helping families who are struggling with a family member who has autism. It really does so much good at the most basic level, preserving families. What could be more important than that, right? So I thought, okay, well, here's the cause. Here's the idea is carrying Slappy, and Slappy represents the challenges of autism. It's not a burden, but it's a challenge, right? You can't put it down. It's always there. And first she was she didn't like that. She's like, why are you doing that? Why do you want to carry the slam ball, through the Carolinas, the entire length? I'm like, because families can't just put it down. They can't just say, we're going to have an autistic free day today, right? That doesn't happen. And the other influence, Patrick, was, as in my experience as a substitute teacher for exceptional child programs, and I've been doing that for 6 years now. And just watching those kids come in, and every day they face those challenges too, and and they tackle it head on, and I just admire them so much for that. So I thought it was the least I could do to at least have this metaphor for that challenge on my back, running across the Carolinas. I drew, in fact, I have it right here. So I took this this big map book here, and if you were to look at it, see there are lines on every page for me crossing through the Carolinas, drawing my route, and using Google Maps and Google Street View to figure out the best way to go, and doing that over the course of really a month was all I could take off for my family. Being an absent dad was not, there's a limit to how far you can push that. So so that's sort of how it was born, and then we kind of worked out the details and worked out the support and the logistics, which was way bigger than I thought in terms of the logistical support and requirements needed. That was a huge challenge and something we learned as we went. But yeah, then I was like, all right, we've pulled this together. We have the time. We think we've got the support, and then we launched the website and started pushing it out on social media and attracting attention.
Yeah, it's amazing what you managed to do. Like you said, not just your physical, challenge that you were able to overcome but just the logistical challenge. It's incredible. When I was out there at the finish line, I could tell that this was a well-oiled machine, with just many moving parts and many people involved. You had walkie-talkies, making sure you had everything, every little aspect kind of taken care of just logistically. It's funny to me that your first thought was that you wanted to do much longer self-supported, but you did you had basically the opposite of self-supported. Like I said, this was a huge team effort.
Yeah, I would have died if I tried that myself.
I don't know about that. I think you would have found a way for sure. I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned one of the first thing kind of that came to mind was to go up the entire East Coast, which obviously would have been epic, but not, not to take away from what you of course did, but I wanted to find out how you ended up on that route. What made you want to go from the westernmost point in North Carolina all the way across and then down? Like, I'm sure there were probably some other options as well, right?
Yeah, we wanted to focus on the Carolinas was sort of the idea, and the mileage came out, pretty exact to where we wanted. The amount of time available, I can do 25 miles a day and get this done. Originally, we were going to go to the Outer Banks, but then Becky had this great idea, like, you need to end it Surfside, because that's where Champion Autism Network and its sponsors are located. So we kind of, and also it gave me the chance to drive out and survey some of the roads beforehand, which was really good, because some of the mountain roads in North Carolina were really hard. I mean, just like in that they were, no shoulder, very rocky passes, twisty, turny, no line of sight. So I'm really glad we did that, because we had to kind of reformulate the route a little bit. Even as we went, actually, at one point we realized we couldn't go over this pass to Maggie Valley. It was just too treacherous. So we went straight out to the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I ran the equivalent mileage straight up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So we had to kind of pivot a little bit as we went. We didn't have to do that a whole lot, but the mountains were really challenging. But yeah, just the distance and the time available, and sort of where the base of CAN's support is, all pointed towards, let's call this the Carolinas CAN Rock for Autism.
Let's get into the actual trip here. You mentioned a few details here, but I'd love to dig a little deeper here. Day one is, right here, you're getting ready to start this monumental task. What's going through your head as you're about to start? Are you anxious, nervous? Are you like, let's just get this going? What were you thinking?
The evening before, I was mildly freaking out because of, this has been 8 months preparation. And, honestly, I didn't even know if I could do it. I mean, I trained so hard, but I still wasn't sure. The most I'd done was 3 days in a row of 17 miles, deliberately to avoid injury, but still, I was really unsure. So Charlie Engel gave me a call the night before, and that was the most important call of the whole event. I mean, he just teed it up for me. He's like, look, here's what you need. It's one step at a time. Don't think about 14 days or 29. Just think about 1 mile at a time, one step at a time, 1 foot forward, and worry about that. Get through the day, and tomorrow is another day. And don't worry about Don't worry about the press. Don't worry about the fundraising. It's like, you have to succeed in the event yourself. The other things will sort themselves out, but this is about you succeeding in doing this part of it. In a larger picture, of course, there are other parts to the whole event, but he's like, you worry about you, because that's your job. And it really it kind of, set me off on the right mindset, and that stayed with me throughout the event. The morning of, I was excited and just ready to go, and we were all whooping and yelling when I took off down 74 from the Tennessee border. But it was a challenging day. It was, when you look at this map and you look at the topography, you're like, okay, there's 3,000 foot climb. It doesn't really occur to you that that's really a lot of climbing. So you get out there and it's a different story. So the first day really wiped me out, and that night I was really worried about, like, can I do this? But it's good that we did the hardest part first, because all those self-doubts, kind of, the farther we got in day by day, the more we had the toughest parts behind us. So it definitely got easier as we went. Although I got to say, the last few days of searing heat were full of challenges as well. So, but yeah, I was anxious to get started, but then thinking, like, all right, I've got to, every day has to be perfect, because if I twist an ankle or, get a cold, or, I'm silly things, that could derail you. You had to I was very concerned about that. I was a bit of a hypochondriac.
That advice that you were given was just so good, because I've for the last few months here, I've been super interested in, like, super long, multi-day events like this, specifically the Transcon, run across America. And I know I've listened to a bunch of podcasts from people who have done that, specifically the world record holder for it, Pete Kostelnick, who did it in 42 days. He went from San Francisco City Hall all the way to New York City Hall in 42 days, and that's averaging 72 miles a day. And what's even crazier about that record is you got to factor in the fact that he had a 0 day in there where he didn't go at all. He got hurt somehow early on, like on day 7 or something, and he had to just take an entire day off, yet he still averaged 72 miles a day. That stuff always interests me, and the stuff that I always hear from them is exactly what you said, which is you just have to worry about it 1 mile at a time. And the way that Pete Kostelnick always puts it is, he was looking at it like he was playing a round of golf. So I guess it was, I'm totally going to butcher this, but it was something to the effect of, like, 72 miles would come out to, I guess, like 4 rounds of golf, I guess. So like every 18 miles was like, okay, I finished 1 round of golf, and then, another 18. And he's just like, and what it was it came out to every single mile was like 1 stroke, like one stroke.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So that's how he put it. And it's like, I guess if you're going to tackle something as monumental as that, that's kind of the way you got to look at it. You've got to break it down just bit by bit, because if you look at it as a whole, I've got 28 days left, 26 days left. It's like, oh man, how am I even going to finish this? So you get through the mountains, the early part, like you said. Luckily that was the first part, because that would have been a challenging way to finish. Although you did mention the heat was also a challenging way to finish once you got into eastern North Carolina, and then obviously South Carolina the last day. I guess once you finished off with the mountains, what kind of section was next, and how was your body handling everything? How was your mind handling everything? How was everything going?
So after the mountains, I came down through the foothills and started. So the idea was that I would run through Charlotte into Concord, where I live, which is just north of Charlotte, and actually finish one day at my home. And so we came down through Shelby, Bessemer City, kind of came in through the approached from the west to the east. That was not too bad. Traffic started, the closer we get to Charlotte, the busier traffic got, and that was a little bit hairy. I ran with a bunch of my F3 guys, F3 buddies on the day coming into Concord. And that was a lot of fun. We had about maybe 8 or 9 guys kind of trading off. And then when I came into the neighborhood, we had a bunch of neighborhood kids waiting for me, and we ran down the road, and my neighbors were waiting for me. So that was great. But I will say that it's really hard when you get home to you have to suddenly put your dad hat on. I've got 3 kids, and they're all in school. My daughter's a senior, and I have one in 2 in high school and 1 in middle school. So it is very hard to make that transition from my job is running 25 miles a day to, okay, my job is to be a parent now. And I was warned about that, like this, that's might not be the best idea. Like you may want to just, you're going to get lonely, but you might just want to stay on the road with kind of the mission that you have. But I came in, and it was really hard the next day, kind of transitioning back. I was tired. In fact, I was supposed to be here in my home for 2 nights. And the second night, my wife kind of kicked me out. She's like, you need to go stay at a hotel and just lock yourself in the hotel. And so I stayed in the hotel 5 miles down the road, but it was really necessary. So when you break your concentration like that, it is hard to get going. And I had to do that again about 10 days later. And again, this is my choice, right? This was by design. But when I wanted to drive back and see my daughters in their dance recital, particularly my oldest daughter, who's a senior, was her last one. So I really wasn't going to miss that. But that was like, okay, finish the day, drive 2.5 hours to home, spend 3 hours at this recital, get up the next morning, drive 2.5 hours, and try and pick it all back up again. That was really, really hard. That in fact, that next day was brutal. So the interruptions, although they were self-imposed, that was much more difficult than I anticipated. It was just because you're trying to juggle these balls in the air all of a sudden.
Yeah, there are so many different challenges that you had to face along the way here, just stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think about. But when it comes to the obvious challenge, which of course is just the way your body feels, I mean, how did your body feel throughout the trip? What were some of the low points, I guess, and also how were you able to recover from those low points?
Sure. So, up and down, like good days were followed by bad days. A few things, like the ball never got lighter, right? It never felt like it was 10 pounds. It always 25 pounds in a backpack. If you try it, it's a lot of weight, because it's not even a plate, it's a ball. And so it's kind of pulling you back. And it shifts around. So that was every day, that challenge was there. I never felt like my legs were fresh and suddenly like, oh, I got this. I never, ever felt like, nailed it. That was never there. It was always, okay, how tired am I? And what pace can I sustain? And how much walking am I going to have to do in order to get through this day? The low points, the first night, I was after the first day, I was a total mess, because I'm like, we're so early in, I'm exhausted. How can I do this? And it was a hot day, and I kind of recovered and just mentally pushed my way through it. But there were other days. I wrote in my blog, there was one day, and this was 3 weeks in, where I was running through a state forest in eastern North Carolina, and it was sandy, and I tripped and fell and did a face plant. And I just lay there, just completely dispirited, just felt completely exhausted and empty. Like there's no way I can do this. There's absolutely no way. And I just lay there, for a good 10 minutes. And I had to force myself to get up, brush myself off, face forward, and just walk one foot in front of the other. And that eventually moving got my brain working again, and said, okay, I'm not going to, I'm going to do the best I can for this day. And I got in the mileage. It wasn't easy, but that was just sheer willpower and thinking about the people that were supporting me, and you know, that had placed their trust in me, and I can mentally see the comments that people left on the donation page, and that was really I'm going to say empowering, but really more than that, it was like, I cannot let these people down. I cannot disappoint anyone. And of course, you know, the only person I would really have disappointed was myself, because I'm sure if I hadn't done it, no one would say, I want my money back. Right. That's not the point. But I felt that incumbent upon myself. And then it was like, I think the third to final day, when I basically passed out on the side of the road from heat stroke, I was at mile 24, and I was meeting the team in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was like mid 90s with the heat factor and humidity, and I thought it was okay. I was drinking, but my core just elevated and everything got all bluey, and I managed to croak out to my wife on the walkie-talkie, you know, Cheryl, and then I fell over, and that's where she got me. So but that was at the very end. So it was 24 and a half for that day, and just hydrated. And the next day we walked the entire distance. My legs are so cramped up, I couldn't run. So that took 8.5 hours to do the distance, but we got it done. So it's just, a lot of it is just willing yourself to put one foot in front of the other. And I'm a very stubborn person, and I rarely give up. There are races I haven't finished, and now when I think about it, I'm like, you know what, I should have kept going. But at the time, you're mentally done. But I'm older now, and I will say, having all those races behind me and having had what we call DNFs, right? Do not finish, did not finish. Having my share of those, and also having pushed through situations where I thought I would DNF. That wealth of experience really kind of guided me as well, in terms of like, I know I can do this. It just, I gotta get in the right mind, and you know, my body will follow.
Yeah, just incredible. I'm happy that you talked about that one super emotional blog post that you mentioned there, where you just fell flat on your face. I mean, the blog
Yeah.
was fascinating to follow, by the way. I'm so glad that you did that, because I didn't catch every day, admittedly, but I was checking in as much as I could. And you know, for the most part, it was, we went from this place to this place. It looked beautiful. I met up with these people. It was nice. But that one was one where you just really opened up, and I think you said something to the effect of, today was just not good. You know, it just wasn't a good day, something to that effect. And I just remember.
Yeah. And I said, I haven't been honest. Like, I've not been, I've not been straightforward. I haven't like talked about the really, the bad stuff, which is, my back is all torn up. I've got giant, the really nasty stuff. I'm like, no one wants to, I don't want to have a pity party. No one wants to hear about that. But like, I got to tell you, this, this is really, really hard. So yeah, after that, that was kind of a bit of an epiphany, getting through that. And like, you know what, I just need to make this real. Like, tell people like, this is, here's what I'm going through. And I really thought about it a lot before I wrote it. Of course, I got a lot of time to compose this stuff as I'm out there for hours on end, right? And I also do a little bit of voice recording into my phone for observations or things that I'm like, that's really funny, or that's unusual, things that you see on the side of the road. And I have to say that one of the best things about this experience, Patrick, was like being at ground level the whole time, like on the road, and seeing life right there, kind of from a perspective. I'm not driving by, I'm not cycling by, I'm not running through the greenway. I'm like, on the streets, and you just see and experience people and things that you normally wouldn't. You see things on the side of the road. You see, you find a little city municipal park that you had no idea existed. It's all these kind of micro moments, and that tapestry was very, very rich for me going through that. And I certainly feel the better for it, and feel lucky to having been able to experience that, and my support team experiencing that as well.
Let's talk about those last few days. You mentioned they were super hot. I want you to kind of just go through what the last, I guess, I don't know, 3 or 4 days were like, and then especially want to hear about that last day and just that moment of crossing the finish line. What was going through your head and how you were
Yeah.
feeling?
So we finished on last Wednesday, which is hard to believe, but so Monday was my pass out on the side of the road day in Charlotte. And then the next day, because we were going from Oak Island to Charlotte, the next day I was in Sunset Beach. And that's when I walked. That was also my wife and our 25th anniversary. And so I owe her big time for this. This, how do you spend your 25th? Well, I walked with my sun-baked husband for 8.5 hours. But we had our moments too. It was actually a lot of fun. And but I just had to walk that because my legs were all tied up. And also I wanted to have a good finish the following day when I'd be running with other people who were going to jump in and join me. So, but the next day was really challenging too. Running through Myrtle Beach, I got a little woozy at some point, so I just had to stop and rehydrate and cool down. When your body, when your core temperature elevates to a certain point, above that point, you're going to shut down and like you're done. That's it. So you have to, and that's happened to me before. So you have to be really careful. Like you need to just stop and let it, kind of reset a little bit. And then we met some people from the Black Dog Running Company who jumped in and ran with us and showed some support for Champion Autism Network. And then the last, I guess, 4 miles, we had a police escort going through Surfside Beach. And it was really so much fun having the other runners there and the police escort and people making a big deal out of it. And knowing that my wife and my daughter were going to join me at the finish line. And that was really the best feeling ever, crossing the finish line. It still doesn't feel real to me, still processing that whole thing and all the different sponsors and donors who were there to meet us and shake hands. And we met some of the autistic kids, some of the families that Becky works with. And that was so great. I mean, the kids' comments they're awesome. One is like, why aren't you dead? One kid said that to me. Why aren't you dead? I'm like, well, I tried really hard not to die. And then one kid said, like, I'm doing this with you next year. Okay. If I'm allowed to do this next year, you and me, buddy, we're doing it. But talking to the kids and the families and, seeing the direct impact that CAN has on their lives and their attachment to the organization was really awesome.
Yeah, I actually heard that kid say that to you, the death comment. Something like, I can't believe you didn't die out there. And you said that you were something like, I can't believe it either. It was pretty hilarious. But I got to say, being there for that last moment was really incredible. Just on my end, I obviously had to, button up the news guy tie and, be behind the camera shooting that last moment. But it was basically impossible for me to separate, the emotions that I was feeling as someone who was just following along this whole thing from before the start, and just reading along the blog post and then seeing you cross that finish line. Just, I gotta admit, I got a little emotional. I was just, I was on the verge of tears. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So I was wondering, were you on the verge of tears? Were you emotional, or were you just so fried? Your body was just so dead that you were just like, oh, finally, I'm done.
Well, so I'll be honest. I actually had my sort of big emotional moment when I got to the ocean at Topsail Beach and actually ran out to the beach, and I called Cheryl, my wife, and I was just sobbing like I made it to the sea, mountains to sea. And I really wasn't expecting that flood of emotion to come over at that particular. I thought it would be at the finish, but it was actually getting to the sea, and not knowing that there are going to be a few challenging days ahead, but just getting to the coast. That was actually sort of like, wow, I've done it. So crossing the finish line, I wanted to be a good moment for my family that was there. And they hustled us off a little bit, and we got to all hug each other and cry a little bit. But really, it was actually seeing the ocean for the first time, where it was like, because I think at that point it was like 26 days, so there was a lot behind us. But yeah, it's you get out there and you're just kind of drained, and so all these emotions are churning inside of you, and you're getting filled up with all these different other experiences. So it really is a lot to process. That was, to be honest, that was, as somebody who's not very outwardly emotional, that was really surprising to me, how these moments would come, and I'd be just elated or blubbering or whatever. And I think it's you're just drained, and you're whipsawing through all of these different things at the same time.
That's so cool to hear that your emotional moment was seeing the beach and being there on the beach. Just these super long journeys, like I said, they fascinate me, and I think a lot of what fascinates me is just the simplistic idea of just, like you said, mountains to sea. Like, you started in the rugged mountains, and when you see, the water there, that is what triggers that. It makes sense, because just
Yeah,
the simplicity of the task at hand. It's just go from the mountains to the beach, and that's also what fascinates me about the transcon thing. It's just, Pacific Ocean to Atlantic Ocean. When you get to
yeah.
that Atlantic, that is the moment. So that's awesome. That's really cool to hear. I wanted to ask you more about, obviously, just all of this stuff with the actual run itself is fantastic, but we can't forget, the importance of, what you did, and how much money you raised. It was what, 43,000, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it's a little more than that now, with some other sponsors who have committed, and so it may be, it's between 45 and 48, I think, right now.
That's
So
incredible.
it's very, very close. Yeah, and it was a lofty goal to begin with, 50,000. I was like, there's no way we're gonna, and then it just snowballed, as we were told it would, as the event kind of progressed and got a little more visibility. So that was really gratifying to see. But yeah, that's gonna fund a lot of programs, a lot of work programs, and sensory friendly nights, and all the great things that Becky's doing, that goes directly into that.
I know something you mentioned to me at the finish line was just about how this trip really taught you, how many people out there are in some way, affected by autism, whether they have a direct family member or they know of somebody or something like that. Every single day, I think you said you came across somebody who you would chat about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and they would tell their story. That must have kept you going.
Yeah, it was really really amazing to see how many people have some connection to autism, or know people who are affected by it. And it wasn't just me, it was in some cases it was the volunteers, and my support crew would go out, and they would be buying lunch, and people would ask, because we had these bright yellow t-shirts, and we had all the logos and signage on the vehicles, and they would ask what it was about. And there were a few cases where I never even had the conversation. It was the volunteers who had the conversation. But it was really amazing how almost every conversation we had, there was some connection. In some cases it was direct. We were talking to somebody who was autistic, or a father or mother of an autistic child. In some cases it could have been somebody had an organization that brought kids into a pool, autistic kids into a pool, and their objective was to get them to slowly learn to get beneath the water, and they give them scuba diving gear. It could take 2 or 3 years, but it's an incredible sensory experience for the kids to be underwater. We met that woman on the first or second day, and I met some teachers who taught autistic children throughout their career. Again, family members. I mean, there was always some kind of some kind of connection. So it was really great to experience that, in the sense that it made us feel like what we were doing was in some way helping Champion Autism Network, but also helping to raise autism awareness, and for these people to know, like, look, there's people out there that are absolutely, on your side. They're advocating for you, and places you can go for assistance if you need it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, just the amount of, like you said, awareness that you were able to bring through this was just awesome. I mean, I know a lot of people were touched by this in some way, so it was definitely a great thing that you did. I wanted to ask you about something we talked about when we first talked, which was some of your inspirations, your people you kind of look up to when it comes to the world of endurance sports, and one of them is the Iron Cowboy James Lawrence. For people watching, this guy, I mean, what can you say about James Lawrence? He is famous for being known as the Iron Cowboy. He participated in this thing where he did 50 iron distance triathlons, which is what, 2.4 mile swim? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
2.4 mile swim, 112, 114 mile bike.
112. Yeah.
112 mile bike, and then you run a marathon. That's an iron distance triathlon, Ironman, and he did 50 of those in 50 days in 50 states back in, I think, like 2015 or 2016. And I don't know if you know Richard, but he's currently in the process of doing 100 iron distance triathlons in 100 days, not in 100 states, because A, there aren't 100 states, and B, he's just doing it all in the same location, I guess, at his
his house.
Yeah, his house. From his house in Utah. And I think as of today, this recording, we're on June 1st, 2021. I think he just finished day 93 today. So he's almost done, which is just, wow. It's been an incredible journey to follow. It's so funny because I had your journey to look along with. And, now that you're done, I'm like, I can't follow Richard anymore, but at least I've got Iron Cowboy to follow in this thing.
Yeah.
Just tell me, I guess, about, how you came across James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, and what about his accomplishments and his just incredibleness stood out to you and really inspired you.
Yeah, I mean, really just his perseverance, and the physical, just a sort of physical sheer willpower of pushing us through that every day. If you watch his documentary, you'll see he's got some really low points, and I thought of that too. That was on my mind. I was kind of going through my own low points where, there's one moment he's in Connecticut riding his bike, and he just kind of pulls over and just sits down, and you think he's done. He's just crashing, just, you never know what's going to hit you. And like, he sits there for, I don't know how long. And then he gets up and he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm going forward. And just like that mental, I just love that mental willpower when you're at this, you're just telling your body, like, go beyond. And he made some mistakes, but and learned from it, and was very forthright about missteps he had and things like that. And the fact that there's a little bit of controversy, like, well, he had saline, or he had to run inside. Well, there was a hurricane one day. He had to run inside, and he was completely dehydrated, and he probably would have, who knows what had happened if he hadn't had. So the purists might think, well, no, it wasn't real Ironman, but yeah, it was an iron distance, and I love how he kind of confronted that head on, like, I had to do this, and this is why. And even his charity, the charity he was affiliated with, there were, a couple of mistakes there that he learned from and went forward. And actually, that was very much on my mind as we were organizing the Ruck. Like, we have to make sure people understand this is Champion Autism Network and the Ruck. We are one and the same, right? There's every the money you give is going to Champion Autism Network, and this is what it's for. And that actually, so watching his challenges, that was really very much on my mind when we were talking about the sponsorship portion. But yeah, I just, his sheer determination and willpower. I love people who are like that, who are just kind of off the charts. in terms of like, I'm going to do this, no matter what, I'm going to force myself to do this.
It's funny you mentioned his haters about how he would use an IV drip or whatever, and I think he did some of his running on an elliptical, and people were calling him out. Oh, it's not real, whatever. It's just so funny to me that people can sit behind a keyboard criticizing the guy who's doing 50 Ironman in 50 days.
Yeah.
It's like, regardless of whether how he's doing each portion, he's doing more than you're doing. That's for sure. And
he was on the elliptical.
Right,
he was on that thing for 6 hours. Like, you try getting on an elliptical for 6 hours, right? Like, it's no small feat. That's the equivalent of a marathon. So yeah, it is. But his 100-day thing, it's, even then, I think it's great too. So he had the 5K run that you could do with him, that kids could do with him every day when he was doing his challenge. And now he's opened it up. Like, you can run with him. You can't run home with him, but you can run with him and participate. And I do like that too, that he opens it up to people who want to kind of be with him when he's doing this challenge, and very kind of democratic about it. I think that's great.
Yeah, for anyone who is watching this who is not aware of the Iron Cowboy, James Lawrence, you got to look him up. You got to look up his documentary. I think it's on Netflix. It's called Iron Cowboy. It's one of the most inspiring things that I have ever seen, and I've only seen it just the one time that I've seen it. I need to watch it again, because that is just, it will really just change your perspective on what's possible after you watch it. That's for sure. Another inspiration of yours who I had not been aware of until I had met you and you had introduced me to him, and I've since done a little bit of research on him, is the Nimble Wheel Nomad, which this guy, I mean, my goodness, man. Like I said, I had never heard of this guy before. He's this bearded, what would you say?
I think he's 85 or 86 now.
Super, yeah, he's up there, and he's still going though. But he's done countless super long journeys just like yours. He doesn't run, he hikes them, but he does these insane challenges. I mean, he's done a Transcon. I think he might have done a few actually. Yep. And he has these incredible journeys where some people will through hike the Appalachian Trail, and he will say, okay, instead of just doing that, I'll also do the Pinhoti Trail, which is 100 to a few hundred miles, that would connected with the Benton Mackay Trail, another few hundred miles, then the Appalachian Trail, then all the way up to the tip of Maine. Just these insane journeys. Just these insane journeys that I find fascinating for the same reason that I had mentioned earlier. Just going from one point to another point, and he's the king of this because he's done dozens of these long journeys like this.
Thousands of miles.
I think he wrote a book called 10 Million Steps or something like that.
Right. That was one of my inspirations for this whole thing, and my wife gave it to me joking around, like, and later she's like, I never should have given you that book.
Yeah, I bet she's probably regretting it now after that. But what about him, kind of drew you in?
Just his perseverance. He also, he never meets a stranger. He's always open to half his blog is about people he's met or old friends he's hiked with. He's overcome, a lot of demons of his own from his past, and owns up to it, owns it. And he just doesn't stop. He also knows his limitations too. Like, hiking, you can get yourself in potentially dangerous situations, and he avoids those. But if you read 10 Million Steps, it's fascinating when he's like, he was the first person to actually trek from the southernmost tip of the US all the way up to the terminus of the International Appalachian Trail. He was the first one to connect all of those together. And he had some just, really challenging hikes through Florida, through the swamps and the just, hiking through mud and water for days at a time. And he just kept going, and always made the best of bad situations too. I love that about him. He's, his positive outlook is really just kind of uplifting. Like, he he's like, this is terrible, but tomorrow won't be. And so I really admire that. And he's in the process now of hiking up through I think through Baxter State Park, through Katahdin. And he sends out blog posts. It's a shorter hike. I mean, the guy's almost 90 now. Yeah.
Incredible. I have only just skimmed the surface really of what all he's done, and I really want to read that book. It's just I was looking at no audiobook version, man. That's rough for me because I spend so much time in the car. Audiobooks are awesome. I can knock one out in like less than a week, but don't have a whole lot of time to actually read. But I'll probably have to find the time to read this one just because I'm so fascinated with what this guy can do and fascinated in the whole world of long journeys like this in general. Have you ever thought about doing something like a transcon or anything, through hiking the Appalachian Trail, anything like that?
Well, so we actually did a pretty epic hike. This was well over 20 years ago, but my wife and I hiked the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, and for a whole month. That's 230 miles.
Don't people consider Annapurna like the hardest mountain to climb?
Or
is that K2?
Yeah, K2 or Anna de Blam, or there's some others, Lhotse. But anyway, this was probably 25 years ago. I quit my corporate job, and she was between second and third year of medical school, and that was kind of the start of it all, when I was like, I'm not gonna live an ordinary life. And so we actually spent a whole year traveling through Asia, but it kicked off with this hike around the Annapurna circuit. And then we did Solukhumbu, the Mount Everest base camp trek up and back. And I think we spent a total of 3 months trekking in Nepal. So that was, and that's dangerous. It can be dangerous. I mean, people, unfortunately people die up there. It is the altitude is a real thing. So that was pretty major, knocking that out. And you get a little jaded after hiking the Himalayas. It's nothing, literally nothing like it in the world. So yeah, I mean, the AT, I've tried to bite off chunks of it, but I think I'd rather do the Pacific Crest Trail first. That just seems to be a little bit more, challenging in terms of the altitude.
Yeah, that trail is that one's incredible. I recently actually watched a documentary that's on YouTube about a dude and some of his friends who through hiked the whole thing, from south to north, and just the changes that you go through on that trail, from the heat of the desert in Southern California all the way to the snow peaks in the northern part of it. It's just that's a fascinating trail. So you're interested in trying to possibly pull off the whole thing?
Yeah, I need to get written permission, from certain people.
Yeah.
I need to lay low for at least 2 months.
2 months, man. That's all it takes?
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I'm going to make it a really good 2 months.
I really hope you do end up giving that a shot, because that will be something even more incredible to follow. Is that something you would consider doing with Slappy, or is that no way?
I don't know. So the future of Slappy is that I'm not sure I'll do any ultra events carrying him, but what we're thinking of in terms of where we're going to go with this is, I really love the idea of doing this nationwide, kind of state by state, not necessarily having people traverse the state, but like, what if you take a closed course and you had teams doing relays over like a 24-hour period, where they could be carrying the ball and then pass it off to another team member, and they run, some miles. Maybe it's on a track, but maybe it's in a state park, maybe it's a closed course, whatever. But I love the idea of doing the Slappy Challenge, where you could have teams carrying the weight, because it really is, it's a group effort. I mean, I couldn't have done it without my team, but I love this idea having teams compete against each other. And it just doesn't even have to be 25 pounds. We could do like a 25-pound, a slappy class, and a slappy light, maybe a 5-pound ball or something like that. But that's, so Becky and I are kind of brainstorming. She'll be here next week, actually, brainstorming about how can we take this idea, because people relate, the ball, it sounds silly, but people just relate to it, right? That's why we kind of characterized it and gave it a face and a name, because it's like, it's identifiable. They kind of get it. And so we want to take that connection and build on it. And we want to take Slappy national.
Very cool. Very cool. But you wouldn't hike the PCT with him though.
I would rather just hike with my gear, with
I
something
don't blame
useful.
You. Yeah.
Something I can use, like food and a tent and a bag.
Yeah, something that's not just hitching a ride for no reason.
Yeah.
Well, for a reason, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I wanted to ask you, and I know we've only got a few minutes here because I promised you I'd be out of here before 9, and 9 o'clock's my bedtime anyway. I got to get out of here. But you mentioned when I had talked to you at the finish line that you wanted to take advantage of the great shape you're in right now after doing something like this, and compete in some ultras probably within the next 3 to 6 months or something like that. Are there any specific races that you had in mind that you want to get done?
There's a 50 miler that I'm going to do in 2 months. I'm going to do there's a 50K next month. It's July. It's kind of going to be not the best time to do it. There's a 50 miler 2 months after that in Georgia, and then I'll pick a 100 miler anywhere and just try and knock that out. And I also have my own ultra that I started it last year, called the Cannonball 31. It's a 31-hour race on a 1.5 mile course in Kannapolis, the town next to Concord. I started that last year, primarily for my F3 buddies, but that was a lot of fun. So I'll sponsor that, and I also run it too. But yeah, I do want to take advantage of the work that I put in, at least, and try and crank out a 100 miler and see what I can do without the ball on my back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure any run without Slappy now is going to feel like 10 times easier than what it would have felt like before.
Yeah, I haven't run since, but I'm planning. I've been swimming, but I haven't run.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a life changer once you go for a run without Slappy.
Yeah.
When is that Cannonball 31? I might have to come on up and give it a shot or something.
It's mid-December. I haven't nailed, but usually it's like kind of that starts that Friday and then goes through Saturday evening, okay. right in the middle of December. And it's nice because we run around the ballpark and they're playing Christmas music and the Christmas lights are out, and it was really a lot of fun last year. So yeah, absolutely. I'll send you details, but it's and we keep it so you can jump in anytime and jump out. And the best part is that the scoring system is I take storage bin lids and a Sharpie, and you just have to write your own laps on it. So it's all on the honor system, which is the way it should be, right? Because it's like, this is about you doing the best you can, and that's all you need.
Yeah, if anyone's cheating in that, I don't know what the point of
it
is.
What's the point? Come on,
you're doing all these miles. You might as well be honest about all of them.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. I'm actually really curious now because I've been thinking about, and this is just totally just asking for my own personal, whatever. Yeah. But I've got my first 100 miler January 15th. So if I were to do that potentially could work. I mean, what are your thoughts as a seasoned ultramarathoner? I guess that would be right around 1 month before my first 100 miler. Do you think that is like a good time frame to get like a big, maybe 60 plus mile kind of effort?
Yeah, it's actually really good timing, and that distance you mentioned is absolutely on point. Like 60, 65 miles, 70 if you're feeling good, but if you're not, then 60 that's absolutely fine. Like you don't want to do more than that. And that 1 month lead time is pretty good. It kind of depends on your age, how far in advance you want to do that big run and then settle down. I've found that that time is compressed a little bit more than I thought. Like I usually want to do it like 3 weeks before, but even a month before, I think that's great. Yeah, yeah, it's
Cool.
good.
I might have to make that happen then, because I'd love to support this thing that you're putting on, you know, and that's, I mean, it's close by, you know, it's
Yeah,
not too far away, and
it's free.
yeah.
It's you literally you just show up and you run the course with a bunch of other guys, and that's, you know, it's like it's about as no frills as you can get. You know, it's
I kind of like that, you know, because a lot of these races, I mean, you know, the sport is growing, and a lot of these races are getting a little bit more like commercialized, kind of, you know, losing the
yeah,
whole grassroots kind of feel. But that sounds about as grassroots as it gets. I might just have to check it out. That free thing is
yeah,
definitely a good point.
yeah. Ultra runners will always find a way to create their own little micro events. You know, even when the sport grows in popularity, there's
Mhm.
always going to be a certain, you know, segment who like want the anti
Yeah.
runner appeal, and I gotta admit I kind of fall in that category.
Richard, I think that covers and we're right around an hour here, so this is actually working out perfectly. Is there anything else about your journey, about CAN, about anything else at all that you want to share before we head out here?
No, just that, you know, this, I mean, you can create, you know, I would encourage people to think about their own journeys and challenges, and the scale and the distance doesn't matter. What this whole thing about, and what life is all about, is getting up and making the effort. And look, we've all got challenges that we face. We might not share them with people. It might just be between, you know, us and God, but it doesn't matter. You need to get out there and just put one foot forward every day. And that's really the whole theme of this thing, is, you know, one foot forward, regardless what the challenge is and the challenges you're facing. It can be done, and you'll always be better for it, even just by making the effort. And that's really what I want to encourage people to think about.
Richard Sexton, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and I'll
Yes.
definitely be following along once you do the PCT.
Yeah. Well, before that, we're going to see you in Kannapolis on the Cannonball 31.
I think you might just have sold me on it. I
All
would
right.
love to
Awesome.
come.
All
Thanks so much, Richard. Appreciate it.
right, Patrick. Great speaking with you.
See ya.